We're all in agreement on that one. Other places in your lungs, in our bronchi, have cilia that helps to collect any pathogens that have gone through, whether we've inspired it through our mouths or through our nose, to help not settle in our lung, so we'll cough it up there. The oily sebum of our sebaceous glands. What are sebaceous glands, folks? Sebaceous glands, come on, my anatomy physiology folks, you better know.
Your sweat glands under your arm.
There are oil glands. There are oils, what provides oil to our skin. Mine does not work very well because I got naturally dry skin. But the sebaceous glands produce oils on our skins, and those oils actually contain lysosomes, which are chemical breakdowns. They break down the chemicals inside cells that will actually not allow pathogens to grow. So that's another one. Let's see. We actually have lysosomes in our saliva as well. Okay, our saliva produces lysosomes, but again, when we ingest foods that have pathogens in them, that's the first time they'll try to attack those pathogens and not even allow them to get down into our intestinal tract. The HCl in our stomachs. Okay, we talked about, oh, wait a minute, we're doing GI today, so no, we're going to do it today, later. The HCl in our stomachs, which is a powerful acid. Any pathogen that enters our bodies through that pathway, HCl is going to chomp it up and break it down and try not to allow it to get into our intestinal tract, to make us ill. The actual acidity and alkalinity of the intestinal tract, it provides us protection because most pathogens require specific pH. When you're not in that specific pH, the pathogen cannot reproduce. If it can't reproduce, it can't attack us. Oh, this one's the one you're going to really enjoy. In the urethra, the fact that we urinate through the urethra, okay, it does not allow pathogens to attach because we're flushing it out. So actually using the restroom on a regular and ongoing basis is a protection from infection, because we always have some pathogens at the end of the urethra, and by flushing it out, it can't come in. So, and the acidity of urine adds to that same mechanism, because pathogens have very specific pH requirements, and the fact that your urine is acidifying the urethra does not allow pathogens to grow. So those that don't go to potty very often, not a good thing.
What about the acidity from the vagina? Is that
The pH of the vagina, for sure. That's on all the different pHs. That was probably on page 2. Yeah, no, it's fine. No, it's good. I mean, the pH of the vagina absolutely has to do with appropriate. We know that there's resident bacteria in the vagina. That's the way it is. The resident bacteria are pathogens that are going to help to protect us, because they will not allow invading bacteria. And the pH of the vagina, having a slightly acidic vagina, again, does not allow those invading pathogens from replicating. Therefore, they can't replicate. They can't attack us. So, what happens when we take antibiotics?
It not only attacks the good bacteria, though, it sometimes can kill bad bacteria.
Yeah, I mean,
the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue with antibiotics is that, yes, it's going to attack the bacteria that is making us ill, but it's also going to, the antibiotic can't say, this is the bad bacteria and I'm going to kill you. Or you are the resident bacteria that are protecting this host, because we are hosts at that point, that host, so I'm not going to attack it. No, it just goes out and sprays everybody, kind of like a kamikaze warrior. We're just going to take everybody down, okay? So the problem with that is that we're killing our indigenous bacteria, which then allows for what?
Suppressed immune system and opportunistic.
It allows our opportunistic infections or opportunistic pathogens to now come in and say, yeah, baby, that resident bacteria has been knocked out. Now I can proliferate, I can replicate, and I can do my thing and then make the person sick. So in just a simple example that Arlene brought up about the vagina has a certain amount of normal resident bacteria. We take antibiotics, we certainly know that the ladies, the next thing they have is what? A yeast infection, because Candida albicans is one of our resident bacteria. It's not a bacteria, it's a yeast, a resident yeast that most ladies have naturally, but it's maintained under control. But once we take that antibiotic, that control is out the window. Other infections that take over that is still a Candida is, especially in children, is they'll get thrush from antibiotic use because of the resident yeast in the mouth kicks in because of the antibiotics. The other one that we certainly know is they get diarrhea. Take antibiotics, they get diarrhea because we have decreased the numbers or the counts of our resident bacteria in the intestinal tract, and now everything, all the other pathogens that are being ingested can now proliferate and give us that lovely secondary effect. Okay. Second line of defense, we start with one that I like better, is fever. Fever is not a disease or a sickness. If people always say, oh, fever, I'm sick. Yeah, that's not the problem. Fever is actually a reaction to the inflammatory process. It is actually the body telling you that some sort of pathogen has entered the body, and the body is reacting to that pathogen because it went beyond the first line of defense, and we're now in our second line of defense. So the body is actually trying to protect itself and to deal with the pathogen that is causing illness. Okay, so fever is a symptom, not a disease. Okay, in medicine, we have one that we use a lot. It's called an FUO, which is a fever of unknown origin. When they can't find the source, they stick that label on it. You got an FUO, fever of unknown origin. They can't figure out where the infection is coming from, and it's always some sort of infective agent.
What line of defense is a fever?
Second line of defense. Second line of defense. Okay. No.
Fever can be, it's also from viruses, right?
Any pathogen, absolutely, absolutely. Usually when it's an FUO, fever of unknown origin, it's a viral agent. They chalk it up to a viral agent because bacteria is a whole lot easier to find in the body than a virus. So an FUO tends to be viral, okay? So what the body's trying to do in fever is up the temperature of the body. Remember, we have many of our pathogens require a certain temperature to proliferate. We up the temperature a little bit, they can't proliferate, they can't multiply, and then the infection, the rest of the body, the pathogens, the macrophages and phagocytes can try to handle the pathogens while the body's response through fever is trying to contain the amount that's in the body, okay? So this is a maternal philosophy towards fever. When my kids have a fever, I don't automatically hit them with antipyretics. You know, there's a certain level of fever that is not the worst thing in the world. No, I don't want my kid to sit with 104 fever. That's not good because it'll cook your brain. But you got a fever 100, between 100 and 101, you can keep it there. You're doing your body good. Not necessarily the most important thing to knock the fever out. Number two, certainly with my younger ADHD child, it kept them laying low. You know, because you don't want to run around very much when you got a little fever going on. But as soon as you get it down to that 98.6, bam, they're running around like lunatics.
You let them fever to keep them quiet.
Because the body needs rest. I'm the world's worst mother, aren't I? No, the philosophy is not to keep them down. It is so that the fever does its job. But it has a secondary effect to keep them laying low, keep their body resting, keep them on the couch or in bed, so that the body can get the rest it needs, and all the energy that the body has is generating is going to fighting the illness, not running around like a lunatic. When you have a kid with ADHD, yeah, they run around like a lunatic.
Is it 101.2 or 102.1?
100.4 above is considered a fever.
No.
I don't know, I mean, where we want to give the Tylenol, is it 102.5?
You have to do as your pediatrician tells you, okay? Or your maternal instinct, whichever comes first, okay? I'm not telling you that you should let your kid run a fever. I'm just telling you my maternal philosophy. It's funny, she's laughing, it's a little hard at that thing. Don't you like coming to school with something
Yes,
like
I love it.
A lot of fun. See,
awesome.
actually learning a few things. Okay, where was I? Transferrin is a glycoprotein made in the liver that has a high affinity for iron. iron is an element that pathogens require to multiply. So the second line of defense of the body is going to scoop up all the transferrin, okay, and use it for their own red blood cell creation and try to get it away from the pathogen. So it's going to bind to the transferrin so the pathogens cannot use iron, and therefore if they can't use iron, it helps to decrease the ability of the pathogen from replicating. Okay? Fever and asthma, okay. Interferons, small antiviral proteins produced by virus-infected cells that prevent them from multiplying. There we go. Our own cells are going to continue in that second line of defense to try to get us not to be ill. So the cells that are being infected by viruses are going to produce interferons, and they're alpha, beta, and gamma, and they're going to send these out to prevent the virus from multiplying. Once again, if the virus does not replicate, cannot multiply, then it cannot make us ill. And that is the whole goal, not to get sick. Let's see, interferons are not virus specific, okay, but they are species specific. So in other words, if a virus, a herpes virus is infiltrating a cell, then it will produce an interferon to attack the herpes virus. It may not take care of a different kind of virus that I can't think of off the top of my head, but it will be specific to the herpes chain. Interferons can cause non-specific flu-like symptoms. So in other words, you're going to get that malaise, you're going to get that low-grade fever, you're going to feel kind of yucky, okay? That is the body's response. Again, the body's trying to get you to lay low, and it's trying to send out these chemical mediators to make sure that the virus does not infiltrate. And that's all part of your second line of defense. I have a second pot of coffee, and I have a third one. I'm just warning you. Huh? Yeah, hold on tight. Life's about to get bumpy. Okay, the complement system. This is not one I'm going to go through too in-depthly, nor do I want you guys to go through too in-depthly because it's actually quite convoluted. The point of it is that there are 30 different proteins found in normal blood plasma that complement the immune system. In other words, they work with the immune system to try to protect us from infection. And they're part of what's known as the complement cascade. Very much like the clotting cascade, when our bodies are being attacked by any kind of pathogen, the complement cascade will kick in and go through a long, lengthy process to try to protect us from infection. Okay? Phagocytes are going to actually come in and deposit opposponins, which are antibodies, or they are pieces of antibodies, and they're going to try to attach them to these pathogens so that the phagocytes that are rolling around the body are going to recognize these little bits and pieces and say, wait a minute, this is not supposed to be here. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to attach to that opposponin, and I'm going to then know that I have to phagocyte this particular cell because it's got disease in it and the body does not need this. That is part of the complement cascade, and that is the second line of defense. In the second line of defense, we have an acute phase protein, which rapidly responds to infection. So like you get a cut, okay? Okay, I know you all know because we've gone through this, the clotting cascade. Well, in that clotting cascade, we're gonna have these acute phase proteins come in an acute response because we know that if you've got a cut, you have inflammation. That is the beginning of the process of healing, is inflammation. And usually within that, there's going to be some debris, and because now the intact skin is no longer intact, there's going to be an opportunity for even resident bacteria. Because resident bacteria is supposed to be outside of the skin, not inside. Well, once it gets in the skin, it's no longer a healthy resident bacteria. It turns its ugly little head into an opportunistic bacteria or pathogen, depending on what's on your skin, and it's going to try to create infection. Okay? So our acute phase proteins come in, and they try to deal with the bacteria at this level. And one of the examples is the C-reactive protein that we actually check for when we do blood tests, if you see reactive proteins are high, we know that there's infection in the body. Okay, we do that as part of when we do a complete blood count. We look for C-reactive proteins. Our friends, the cytokines, are chemical mediators. They are part of the communication system between the cells that let each cell know what's going on within the immune system. Okay, and we have lots of different kinds of cytokines. And one of the biggest functions of the cytokine is that they actually are chemical attractors of our phagocytes. They send out the signals through the bloodstream that says, hey, there's an infection in this body at this location, and you all need to come and play in our party because we need to get rid of this infection. So the cytokines send out the message through the bloodstream to come to this particular area that there is an infection going on. And they're the chemical mediators that do that, is your cytokines. Okay? We're still in the second line of infection. So I don't know if you're getting the idea of it, but it's a pretty impressive mechanism to try to protect us from infection, because there are lots of different parts of what goes on to try to prevent us from getting ill. Okay? All right, the body responds to any local injury first by irritation. We have microbial invasion, bacterial toxins by a complex system. We call this inflammation. Okay, again, inflammation is not necessarily infection. Okay, they are not synonymous words. Inflammation is something's happening, some injury to tissue has occurred, and the body is doing its job to prevent infection. Okay, so what are the signs of inflammation?
Redness, swelling.
Redness, swelling, heat. Huh? You couldn't have bleeding. Okay, what?
No, I said fever, but you said heat.
Heat. Those are the basic ones are redness, heat, and swelling at the area. And the fourth one that you can put in, because anytime you have some heat to an area and you have edema, you have pain. Okay, because we have pain receptors everywhere, right? And I've done this lesson last week where you could have really seen it, but because it really did hurt. I have a healing, I cut my cuticle. And let me tell you, for 2 days, I thought that my finger was going to fall off. It was big and red. I mean, you can still see the inflammation because this is like in the healing process. Something as stupid as this, and of course I spent the whole weekend using my hands while I helped my daughter move into her dorm room, so I kept hitting it. Because of course, anytime you have a wound, what do you hit? Wherever you got hurt. I mean, it's like magnet. But you can see the whole process, and of course I had prepped this lesson, so I'm like looking at the process going on. But anytime you have swelling to an area, you are distending those pain receptors, okay, through the pressure of the edema, and it creates pain. So that's usually the fourth one. Okay, so